Okay, we're going to get started. So this is actually, and I was looking over this presentation before I started, and I think that this particular presentation is really probably one of the most important you can ever hear of all my presentations. If you've ever, been on my presentations before, this particular presentation, I'm going to go into quite a bit of detail about why people don't get jobs. These are the reasons that people always don't get jobs. When I counsel people that aren't getting jobs, it's always these reasons that I'm going to talk to you about today. I'm actually very excited about this presentation. The people on it, you're going to get a real treat because you're going to learn exactly what you need to do. And it's anybody. It doesn't matter what your background is. It doesn't matter what you went to school. It doesn't matter how senior you are. It doesn't matter what practice setting you're coming from. All of this applies to you. So I'll give this presentation. After the presentation, I will take questions about this, and you can ask questions about this or anything else in your career. Typically, people ask more questions about other things in their career than this, but that's fine, and I have time to answer all the questions everyone has. It's very common for people, for law students, attorneys, and others to get job offers and then go to jobs where they're unhappy, and it doesn't really have to be that way. It's also very common for people to have a very difficult time getting jobs and spending the time unemployed. And when they go on interviews, they don't get the jobs that they want. They don't understand what's going on. They think that they're doomed, that they did something wrong in the past on their resume. Just not true. Other people often will give up the practice of law entirely because they feel like they can't get hired, or they feel like there's something wrong with them, which always can be fixed. I'll tell you about that today. And it just, to me, it makes no sense. I have a certain method of getting people jobs. It always works. It always has. But people are scared of the things that I say. And you may be scared today, too, when I talk to you. Their egos get in the way. I don't know, they don't take the right actions. And it's very easy for you to reach your full potential and not be unhappy. People make the employers miserable when they don't like their jobs and they don't fix them. And these issues carry on into their careers and lives. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. This is a very serious topic because a lot of people aren't happy practicing law. And you may be in the same boat as well. And if you're unhappy, this is really going to elucidate and tell you what you actually need to do to be happy. Everyone can find a place where they're happy. It's absolutely possible. There are 30,000 plus law firms that are organized law firms, meaning 5 or 10 people at the minimum and even bigger. Obviously, there's a lot of opportunity out there, but if you're not getting that opportunity, you're doing something wrong. So the first question you need to ask yourself, if you're not getting offers, or if you're not finding places that match your interest and that you like, that you have to ask yourself, or you're getting jobs at firms that you think are beneath you, or you have to ask yourself if you've done everything possible you can to get job offers and find places where you can get a job. It just seems like everyone thinks that they only need to do one thing. It's absolutely crazy. People will say, oh, I'm only going to check Law Crossing for jobs, or Indeed for jobs, or LinkedIn for jobs. I'm only going to apply to firms that are this type of prestige level, or people just have all these things. And the idea is if you're not getting the job offer that you want, you're doing something wrong. A lot of times people get mad. People are mad all the time. Like they're thinking, oh, I didn't get this job I wanted, or this job's beneath my skill set, or this job pays less than I should be making. Others just don't get job offers at all. They get jobs that they just go out on interviews, or maybe they don't even get interviews. That's very common as well if you have the wrong resume. And then people also feel like they're applying to lots of positions and not getting a lot of traction. And if you're not getting the jobs you're capable of, there's typically, again, I've been doing this 25 years. I've helped tens of thousands of people get jobs. So I'm just going to tell you, like, frankly, what happens and what I've seen. I live this profession. I start my day, when it's dark out, and I do it. I work, do it a long time, 12, 15 hours a day. So this is what I've seen. And again, I'm telling you, this is someone that is a recruiter. I have no self-interest in you using our service. I'm just trying to help you get a job. I run job sites and I do whatever, but I'm just telling you the main reasons people are having problems. So the first one, this is absolutely the most important reason out there. It's that you're not applying to enough places or enough markets. This is a crisis in legal job search. It's a crisis that most people are drastically under marketing themselves. What happens at BCG is every week we send out reports to candidates showing them where they've applied, interest in them, if they've had interviews, and people just are like, oh my God, I applied to 10 firms and I didn't get an interview, or applied to 20 firms and this firm must be doing something horrible. What are they doing? I'm not getting interviews. But the point is most people are drastically under marketing themselves in their searches. But under marketing means if you're looking for a job, you should be not just looking at job openings, you should be looking at a lot of firms to match you. And people just do not find the right employers. And because they don't, and they have certain types of ways of searching, they typically don't find positions at all. It's just how it works. Most people think they've done everything right, but it's absolutely not true. Almost 99% of attorneys that are doing job searches are not doing their job searches correctly. They're doing them wrong. They're not exposing themselves to every possible opportunity. And if you're under marketing yourselves, you're never going to know if you're getting the best offer you can. So what does that mean? That means that if you are in a city like Los Angeles, where there's 10,000 places, I don't know, it's probably not 10,000, but I think there's probably 3,000 to 4,000 law firms. Wow. Think about the opportunities that you may have if you want to work in one of those. Same thing in New York City. But most attorneys are very controlling in their searches. They think they only need to apply to a few places, or they believe that they need to study every employer and read online reviews and exhaust and study everything exhaustively before they apply. But you can't. Well, this is absolutely insane, because most law firms, people that study law firms, are just wasting their time, because most law firms have multiple practice groups and different people you could be working with. And you could not, if you go to SCAD and ARPS, every practice area is different. So if you work in M&A, yeah, you're going to work really hard, but not in art law, not in different practice areas they have. So if you read an online review of a firm, that's not really going to show you what the firm is. It doesn't really help. I work with attorneys all the time that work with other legal recruiters. They come to us after nothing happens. The typical thing our legal recruiter does, if you've worked with one or you talk to them on the phone or once called you, is the recruiter will only send them to, typically they only have big firms. They might have a couple of boutiques, but they'll send you to a few firms that have big firms that have openings. And if you don't get an interview, then you just don't hear from them. You may hear from them, you just may never hear from them again. You may hear from them. It's like meeting a date that wants to hook up with you or something, and then never hearing from them again after they get what they want. And this is what they do. And I'm not saying it's evil. This is how the business is run. It's how it has to work for a lot of people. But it's not, and again, I'm not criticizing recruiters here, because there's a certain model that works. And if you were a recruiter, you would want to go after the best people. And if they didn't get interviews, you would try to move on to people that would. And that's how they make a living. So there's nothing wrong with that. But a lot of attorneys that are applying through legal recruiters, or just applying to a few firms at a time, are often unemployed for a long time. They just stay there waiting for things to appear to them and believe that they need to be wooed by someone in order to apply to a job. And this happens all the time. When I represent someone, though, and what our company does is different, it's very different, but we try to get people to look at more firms and more markets and get exposed to as many jobs as possible. Am I telling you this to sell you on using BCG? No, I'm telling you the way to get a job. And every day, not tons of candidates, not tons, but a lot of candidates get interviews from us with law firms that don't have openings. How many interviews? 85% of our placements and interviews are with firms that don't have openings. So I just want that to sink in a minute. 85% of all placements that we make are with firms that don't have openings. These firms do not have public opportunities. We know the kind of people that they interview because we profile the firms, and we have all sorts of data science and things we're using to make it. But if we were making placements at just firms that had openings, we would make 5 times or 7 times or 7 times fewer placements than we do. And our company would not be what it was. I want you to think about this, because what we do is something you can do too. It doesn't matter. But I look at firms, and big firms, small firms. With attorneys like a tax attorney and accounting firm in New York, I know that it's going to be very difficult for them to find a law firm if they come from an accounting firm. And even if they were trying to get transition to that, they have all their experience with the accounting firm. So a traditional recruiter would say, hey, this person's not going to get a job. We've never placed someone like this at a firm in New York, so we're just going to give up. So what we do is we'll send that person, basically explain, if you want to work in a law firm, you need to look at other markets. And that was, in this particular Kansas case, Nebraska, because sometimes you can apply to markets and firms where there's no, you wouldn't think of, and you can get great jobs. I had something very funny happen. There was this like shale boom, and it was happening in North Dakota. And all of a sudden, I was sending all these people to North Dakota, and they were having this incredible economic resurgence that was unlike anything you can imagine, because they were mining all the shale, and because gas prices were high, and people were getting all sorts of jobs, paying just what you might even get in New York in frickin' North Dakota. Like, this isn't happening anymore. But this person that got this job in Nebraska had no problem, wanted to be in a place where he could raise a family, and it was a great thing for him. So the point is that you can't, I'm not saying that everyone should go to Nebraska, but what I am saying is that if you look at more markets, you're going to get more jobs. And meaning, if you're in Chicago, you can look at Minneapolis, you can look at Madison, Wisconsin, you can do all sorts of things. And again, if this person really wanted to work in New York, we could find a small law firm with a few people that was having a hard time recruiting because of its size, and we could get him a job there. You can penetrate and get a job in any market if you look at and you find opportunities that at places that other people are ignoring. Other recruiters are going to ignore very small firms because they don't pay as much, or it's just how it works. Or when you do your search, may look at firms that are on certain lists and only apply to those. But you have to find smaller places and different places to buy jobs, because there are opportunities everywhere. And most of those firms, the firms of the thousands of firms in Los Angeles, for example, most of them have never contacted recruiters. They don't even know how to post a job on a job site. They may be posting through recommendations from other attorneys and stuff, or getting jobs, or finding people that way. But if the right person shows up, they're going to hire them. Think about what it'd be like if you were a law firm. You're sitting there and you have more work than you can personally handle. You're doing busy work that would normally be done by an associate. You don't have anyone to help you. And so you're doing all this work you don't want. You're getting calls from clients needing extra work and willing to pay. And all of a sudden, a resume shows up on your inbox, or you get a fax, which you fax things too, just to get people's attention, of the perfect attorney that can do that work. You are going to bring that person in. That's how it works. That's how the law firms think. If you find someone with a lot of business from work that needs help, and they haven't posted a job, they don't know how to write a job, and someone just shows up, they hire them. And again, if a law firm has the work, they can make money. So you're a cash machine. If you're billing out if they can bill you out at $350 an hour, and you bill 2,000 hours a year, that's 700,000, and you may be happy with 200,000. So this is just how it works. They can make money with you. So if you show up and you're like, this is free money, who wouldn't hire you? Come on, if you're qualified. Just think about it from the status of the employers. So most law firms have gaps, and that means there's work that they're accepting and not doing because they don't have the attorneys to do it. So imagine you're a law firm and you're getting all this IP litigation. You don't have any technical people that can do it there. So you're just winging it, and sometimes you have to maybe give it out to other firms. And all of a sudden, an IP litigator shows up, and you're like, wow, now I have someone that can do this. And they hire you. This is what we do. We find positions for people at firms where they don't have openings, but the firms can make money hiring them. And again, I'm not telling you anything. We have special ways of doing this, but this is nothing. You can do this on your own. We use our contacts, we use our research, and then we look at the history of the firm and the fact that even if they don't have openings, if we sent them 10 litigators, they've interviewed 7, and we know that, heck, this is a really good firm to do that with. And that's what we do as recruiters. And especially what I've seen is if you're looking for an in-house position, a government position, or a public interest position, you need to do the same thing. You need to apply to every single person you possibly can. Sending your resumes to general counsels of a bunch of companies, small and large, is a great way to get a job. I used to have a company called Legal Authority, and we would do that with people. And people would get multiple in-house offers when they've been sitting inside of a major law firm for 5 years of trying to get a job in a company, but having no luck. So it's just how it works. And you're going to get better results if you look at more opportunities. This is Law Crossing, which is a site that our company owns, but you can go on that site and all the positions, not all of them, but the majority of them at law firms are also, you can find them there. So that's something, just giving you a tip. There's also something on Law Crossing called Law Crossing Archive, where you can look at all the firms that have had openings in the past in your practice area and location. And if you do that, that's going to make a major difference for you, because you can start targeting places that have looked for people like you in the past, but may not have current job openings. So this is, again, I'm not trying to promote this service here, but this is a research service. It costs money. I believe it's $39 or $25 a month or something, depending on what offers. But people will say stuff like, I've never paid to look for a job, and thinking about the fact that $25 a month can make a huge difference in your 30, whatever it is, in your getting a job. But people don't do that. They think, oh, I shouldn't have to pay, or the employer should always fly me out to interviews. I think that there's some sort of economic thing that, but you need to go and increase your reach and the number of employers you're applying to. If you do that, you're going to increase your odds exponentially of getting hired. And you need to do massive amounts of research and other work to find positions. And you should network and apply to firms without openings and people that you know. And you don't let a rejection affect you. This is crazy. Like, people get upset that they apply to a firm and the firm doesn't bring them in, and they think there's something wrong with them. Let me tell you how it works in firms, by the way. They sit there and they get all these applications when they have jobs, and they don't pay attention to your name, or they just look at your schools and your experience, and that's it. And there's no weird, they don't even remember it. I mean, that's, I guess, what I'm saying. Most firms are getting a lot of applications, not necessarily when they don't have openings, but they're getting a lot of applications. And there's nothing about your ego or something you should worry about getting rejected. That you should be proud of yourself for trying. People somehow they think, oh, if I apply to this many places and don't get an interview, there's something wrong with me. No, absolutely not. Everything is, think about a moving parade. A parade moves and different things. And if you want to hit a trombone player with a tennis ball, you're going to have to throw the ball at the exact time that the person with the trombone is walking by if you're going to hit them. Other times you may just hit the wrong time at the firm. You may hit a float. You may hit, who knows, but you have to, when you launch a search and you hit the firm at the right time and they need the work, you'll get an interview. And the thing that's upsetting is people, when they submit applications, they expect the employer to reach out to them and realize their value, and it just doesn't always happen. And you need to work really hard to find opportunities. Now, I'm not young, but when I used to be in law school, we would go and we would print up letters to maybe 500 firms and send them out asking for interviews and jobs. And if you did that, even from a top 10 law school, you might get 2 or 3 calls and maybe 1 interview. This is how it works, even if you're a really good student. So this is just how it works. And that's how I learned this. I was done with the clerkship, or it was almost over, and I hadn't taken the bar yet. And so I had to decide where I was going to take the bar. The clerkship was ending in like August, and maybe June or something, and I hadn't found a job. So I decided I was going to look in California, and I'd worked in New York, but I really didn't want to go back to the firm I was at. And so what did I do? I went and I did research in the government computers and Martindale and so forth, and I pulled up like 300 or 400 firms I could work at and printed letters, and I put it on my stationery, and then I sent the letters out, and I got maybe 5 or 6 interviews, but they were with good firms and some were not good firms. This is just how it works. I was a very good student. I was law review and like very, very well academically, and doing a clerkship, and I worked in a big New York firm in the summer and doing other things that were great about my background. And it was a perfect time to see, but that's how many interviews I got. And think about that. And so it's not, even with the best qualifications, you're not always going to get interviews. But the firm I did get a job at was Quinn Emanuel, which was awesome. It was like a 45-person law firm then. But I got interviews at a bunch of other places that some were small. They were things but really good firms. So you need to do everything you can to find a good position and to apply to places. And that means applying to a lot of places. And if you're not getting the right results, you need to find new places. You also need to be geographically flexible. When we get done with this, what we completed after we take a quick break, I'll come back and show you how to find firms, because all you need to do these days, you can certainly go on to lists like Chambers and all these things where you find the best firms, or BCG, we list firms. I think we have tens of thousands of firms on there that you can find. But the big deal is you can use Google. Google is incredible. But Google will go, and if you say you want to find a firm that does trust and estates in Sheboygan, Michigan, just some random place, it will tell you, it will have all of them. It will know, and it will have all of them. And those firms are certainly not going to be in any Chambers or Martindale or any others listings of best lawyers and things. But this is what happens. And then you apply to those firms. And of course, they won't get applications like you very often. And you'll probably get an interview if you're that kind of attorney. The other thing is being geographically flexible. There's really a lot to digest about being geographically flexible. But the more markets you apply to, the better off you'll be. So every candidate that comes into BCG, I try to do everything I can to get them to apply to other markets. Now, I don't try to get people that aren't in California. I don't have the California bar to apply to California firms. I don't try to get people who don't have the Florida bar to apply to Florida firms. Those are two difficult firms, but most of the other ones, states, yeah, you can pretty much, a lot of them weigh in, or it's not as difficult to get into them. So yes, you should be geographically flexible. I have people all the time that are in big markets where if you're in San Francisco right now or the Bay Area and you're a securities attorney or something, you're going to have a really hard time getting a position because everybody's not doing this work and they're laying people off. So if you try to get a job there, you'd be insane. You might get a job, but everyone's letting people go, or there's too many people trying to do the same thing in that market. So what happens if you apply to firms in Sacramento or Fresno or Orange County, places where there's maybe not as many people? So it works. And the more markets you look at, the more success you're going to have, because you're putting yourself in markets where there's opportunity and where there may not be opportunity in your market. What does that mean? Markets like New York are crowded with incredible numbers of good attorneys. And those firms in that city have no problem shrinking headcount when the market gets slow. That's just how it works. And then all those great people are competing for the same jobs. And so it becomes extremely difficult to get a position. And because there's so many people there, the law firms can afford to be very discriminating in the types of people they hire. So whereas being unemployed and looking for a job in Omaha or something might not be that big of a deal, in New York, they just have all these ways of disqualifying people, and it's going to be much harder. So the biggest piece of advice, this is honestly one of the most important things. You should write it down on a piece of paper. You should put it up when you're doing things. But if you undermarket yourself and you don't apply to enough firms and you don't look at enough places, you're in huge trouble. You're not going to get the positions you want. I don't want to take too much time on this, but I can tell you countless stories of people that have done this, followed this advice, and turned around their lives. It's been people that have done bad things at their firms and been fired. It's been people that have been accused of illegal things, and even though it wasn't true, and they're exonerated. It's been people that had mental breakdowns that they fixed and were out of work for 6 months or a year. But then they did this and everything changed. And it's absolutely incredible what happened when you do this. And you have to look at other markets. What markets? The best markets to look at are the markets where you grew up. So if you're from a certain thing and you say law firms love that, you can apply to a lot of places, you'll probably get a lot of interviews. Other markets might be where you worked at one point before you went to law school, or where you lived, or who knows. But you can look at a lot of markets, and you should. And if you have a good reason for working in that market, or that firm has a special thing in your practice area, then apply there. But this is how it works. A lot of people, for example, when they're applying for judicial clerkships, I did this. I applied to all the judges in the Detroit area. That's the only place I applied. And I got one interview. So I applied to 10 or 11 federal district judges, and I got one interview and a couple of phone calls and with questions. But that's really dumb. I should have applied to clerkships all over the country. Then I would have got to work in California instead of a Rust Belt town that was former lumber outside of Detroit. So you can really expand or I could have worked in Miami or New York or some fun place. But instead, I limited myself to one market. So don't limit yourself to any markets if you can. And certainly apply to a lot of places because you're going to get a lot of rejections. It doesn't matter. It's just how it is. And it's because law firms sometimes have openings, sometimes they don't, sometimes work is slow. So the other thing that law firms do that you need to do is you may be trying to get the wrong type of legal job. Your background is what it is. It's nothing you can change. There's all sorts of limitations and rules in the legal profession you're up against. If you are a law student looking for a job, if you don't have good grades and you didn't go to a great law school, this is just going to control the sorts of employers that are interested in you. There's nothing you can do about it. If you go to a local law school or a law school that's not highly ranked and you don't do that well there, you're going to have a very difficult time getting a position with a major law firm. It's just what it is. You can't do it. You can actually move up and start at a smaller firm and work into a top law firm, which happens all the time. And I do that. I have people doing that in our company almost every week. People that started out at small law firms doing one thing and then moved to a bigger one. So it doesn't mean if you have bad grades or not a great background, you're going to be closed off to large firms forever. It just means until you have a marketable track record and get something, you're not going to get something. I have almost every week, I have these instances where people get jobs that are, it's almost miraculous. I had one guy that went to Rutgers for law school, wasn't a summer associate anywhere. And then when he got out of law school, was unemployed. Think about this. So he's bad shape and he'd been unemployed for 6 months. And then he used to walk his dog in a dog park. And he used to talk to this guy every day that was walking his dog at the same time. And then I think families met or something. And anyway, he found out that the guy was like a hiring partner at Mayor Brown or something. And the guy actually hired him or brought him in and got him hired. So miraculous things happen all the time. I see it all the time. I saw another guy, this is last week, that graduated from a third-tier law school and met some guy on LinkedIn that had some contact, and he got a job at another AmLaw 100 law firm. This incredible stuff happens, but you just have to, so you can get lucky even if you don't have a good record, and it happens all the time, but it doesn't happen very often. But if you're a corporate attorney and you want to switch practice areas, it's impossible. It's not completely impossible, but it's very hard. Why would a law firm hire someone that is in one practice area and have them do another? It doesn't make any sense. So I've seen, just so you understand, if you're like a litigator and you want to be corporate, or if you're a corporate, like a patent litigator and you want to do real estate, people do this all the time. And you just can't do it. It's not going to work. Most law firms are not going to hire you. The market's not going to be interested. I've seen people literally first in their class from the best law schools trying to switch practice areas and not having any luck. The market's just not interested. The other thing is if you're working for an in-house company, or you're working in the public interest or the government, it's very hard to get challenged but hired by most law firms. Law firms want to hire people from law firms, and that's how it is. Why would a law firm want to hire someone that has chosen not to work in a law firm? Law firms are different than working in-house. Anything on your background that shows a lack of commitment to a law firm practice setting is going to hurt you and make it more difficult for you to get a job. Now, you can actually get jobs if you're applying to a lot of places with that background, if you have the right approach, but most people don't. And so if you're a major law firm, and also if you're an attorney at a major law firm and don't have any business, it's also going to be very difficult for you to get hired by a major law firm. The law firms are interested in people with business. I place attorneys that are senior in major law firms and small law firms and get them jobs all the time. But it's certainly not easy. You need to apply to a lot of places. And competitive markets are extremely difficult. So what are competitive markets? Any major city is a competitive market because not only are there a lot of people trying to work in those firms, but there's also a lot of local attorneys competing for the same jobs. And it's just very difficult. The bigger the city, the more the demand. But if you're trying to get into a big city and you're not targeting the right firms, it's going to be very difficult. And you need to target firms that aren't getting a lot of applications. Competitive markets are difficult. If you want to work in New York City and you're working in Kentucky, that's probably not going to work with the majority of law firms because there's plenty of talented people they can hire there. And again, if you are applying to the wrong sorts of jobs, you're going to not have good luck and you're going to get discouraged. But again, why, if you were a law firm, why would you hire someone that wants to do a different practice area than they're experienced with? Why would you hire someone from, if you're in a big market, when you have plenty of people that are local and don't have to take the bar or whatever, you just have no incentive to do it. Now, certain firms do. If you apply in enough places, you'll find someone who does. But that's how it works. But a lot of people, like I have people that use this service called reverse recruiting that's at BCG. And that's basically for people that want to do their own job search and have me talk to them and help them apply to the types of jobs that they want in firms. So I do all the work for them. But people come in all the time and they're like a litigation attorney and they say, hey, I only want to do data privacy and I'm in Memphis, Tennessee. And I'm like, that's impossible. You don't have the experience. You may have gotten the certification, but no one has any incentive to hire you. And that's all I want to do. That's all I want to do. I want to do data privacy in Memphis. And I identify, 75 firms that have a data privacy, at least some mention of it on their website and that they do it. Person applies, they still apply to that. Then they come back and they're angry, like, why did you give me a data privacy job? And I'm like, how can I get you a data privacy job when you've been a litigator for 7 years? It doesn't make any sense. And this is what people do. And then they're upset and it's crazy. So you have to apply in there. When I talk to them, you can get a lot of litigation jobs. You can look at a better litigation firm than you're at. I can do all this for you. I can get you more money. I can do all this. But they just know I want to do data privacy. I want to do data privacy. And so this is what people do. And others have these lines in the sand. They put lines in the sand about the money limit, which I can understand. But if you need a job, you have to think about that. Others will approach firms and say, I only want to work 30 hours a week or 25 hours a week, or I need Thursdays off to do this. And others will want remote work, saying, I don't want to work in the office, but I'll come in 1 day a week if necessary. And they just set limits with employers. If you're setting these ground rules with your employers, unless the employer can't find someone better, what do you think they're going to find someone better that's not going to have all these rules? And so a lot of times, you need to really think seriously about this, because the more limitations you put in front of employers, the harder it is going to be for you to get a job there. So just think to yourself, could this law firm find people other than me that could do the job and wouldn't have these limitations? And if the answer is yes, then you're probably not going to get a position. I've seen people get these positions all the time. It happens every week. At BCG, people get jobs that do that, but it certainly makes it harder. This is a big one. Your resume and your cover letter need a lot of work. So I will do each quarter, I do a resume review webinar where everyone sends their resume to us that wants to do it. And I basically mark every resume up and show you how to fix it. So it's a great topic, and it's something you can do. I offer it 4 times a year. Also, if you're a BCG candidate, I also do it publicly where I take every one of these, I take your name and everything off, but I interview all BCG candidates that we're working with every Tuesday. And we do that. I think it's at 3 so we do it every week for our candidates. But every resume I've seen, typically the majority of them need a lot of work. And the cover letter is one thing. People read them sometimes, but the quality of your resume and what you do is really going to make a huge difference about who interviews you and who makes you an offer. When people show up to these resume things that aren't getting offers, it's almost always the same thing. They're too long. They write these paragraphs about summaries, and they put stupid things on there like they understand Lexis and Westlaw and Microsoft Word, and I don't know. It's just, and then they talk about all these different things that they do. They'll say, oh, I do trademark work. I've got experience doing corporate law. I've managed a litigation case. And that's just not going to work. You have to have a resume that's focused squarely on your practice area, because law firms they hire specialists. They need specialists. Again, I say this all the time, if you wanted someone to operate on your brain, you certainly wouldn't go to a general practitioner that does 20 different things. You would want an expert. It's the same thing with law firm clients. They want to hire people that are experts too, and the law firms do. So your resume is not about you. It's about what you can offer and how you focus on the position that's there with that practice area that they're hiring for, and then speak to what the employer is looking for. All the employer is looking for is they want to see a resume and be like, wow, this is an M&A attorney. Have a need for an M&A attorney. They want to see a resume and say, wow, this person does product liability defense. That's exactly what I need. This is how employers think. They don't think about want to read long descriptions of multiple jobs where you're talking about doing different things. They want to see someone that's an expert. And I can't tell you how bad most resumes are, and not most, but a lot of them. They're not thought out. The person wants to list every single thing that they do, and yet their majority of the experience is one practice area. This is the other day, I wrote this, but viewed a resume of a law student who wants to work in a law firm. This person, for over a decade before law school, had a very distinguished military career. It was very common. There's a lot of people that do this, and had all these honors and other things that took up 5 pages of his resume, and spoke to all these leadership activities that he was proud of. This is a great resume for someone to work for the Army going, or whatever, the military going to war. You'd certainly want that person leading you, but how is the law firm going to be interested in someone whose resume is 5 pages long and all it talks about is nothing about what it's going to do to help the employer? This is what a lot of attorney resumes do that are military too, by the way. I don't know why. All this stuff is impressive, knowing how to drive tanks and do. I saw one resume yesterday where the person said, it was a cool resume, but the person said they were a munitions trainee, then they were a munitions expert, then they were a munitions trainer, and then they were head of munitions or something, or maybe it was mortar, I don't know, but they took up the page. But you're not going to get jobs if your resume doesn't speak to legal work. You don't need to list all of your summer internships or things that you did prior to law school, or all these groups that have no meaning to the firms. Like, I was a member of this political club, or I did this pro bono. No, your job is to go to work in a law firm and basically talk about the practice areas. And a lot of people really feel that their resume is personal and they need to talk about all these different things. So imagine you're trying to sell an ice cream bar, and you walk in and you start saying, hey, I sell all sorts of things. I sell lettuce, I sell this, I have great selection of beverages here, like all sorts of sodas. And I also have this ice cream bar, and I like ice cream bars, but look at all the other things I have for sale. If someone's coming in and they want to buy an ice cream bar, that's what you need to focus on. You need to focus on that ice cream bar. You say, I have this ice cream bar. I've been selling ice cream bars for 20 years. I'm an expert on ice cream bars, and I think this is the best ice cream bar. And this is what this ice cream bar is about. It's got it's white chocolate or white vanilla on the inside. It's this. You focus on what the person wants to hear, and that's all you need to do. And your resume needs to look the part of whatever the job is. You need to basically, or whatever the firm does. If you're applying to a litigation job, that's all you should be talking about. And if someone hires you with a bad resume, you're probably you're getting a job that's beneath you, probably. You're going to get paid less than you would if you talked about the work you do. And sometimes having a bunch of things in your resume is going to make you look not committed to legal work. That's going to make you look like you're interested in other things. Do you want the firm to think you're extremely interested in doing pro bono work? Do you want them to think that all of your free time that you could be practicing law is dedicated to working in a soup kitchen? You have to think about how this stuff appears. You may think you're a good person for doing all these things, but that's not going to really, the law firm, it's a law firm that's looking for someone that can come in and do the work. And you have to tell the law firm that's who you are. You have to be very careful about how your resume reads. I will conclude this with saying you should watch some of the resume reviews that I've done on BCG. It will help you tremendously. You will learn a lot. You can watch webinars I've done about resumes, where I talk about resumes. But I would say that probably 75% of the resumes that I see are just too much all over the place. And I know the person's never going to get a job at their level. And this is another thing too. So people that come into BCG, if you apply to a firm, if you apply to a job, or you send your resume to us, I always look at the resumes. Like, I look at every resume that comes in. It's exhausting. It takes me a long time to review them, and it's something I very much enjoy. But you have to really study a resume, and I know the kind of people that are going to get a job. It doesn't matter, by the way, where you went to law school. It doesn't matter how prestigious the current firm is. It doesn't matter if you've had breaks in your work. None of that stuff matters if your resume is focused. So all I'm looking for is this person someone that looks committed to their practice area, and does their resume talk about that? That's it. But unfortunately, that focus results in more than 9 out of 10 people I don't work with them, because how would I be able to place someone that says they do 15 different things. But this is what most resumes do. And because I do that, we make a lot of placements, but it's all about you're focusing your resume on whatever the job is. So an example would be if you're applying for a job doing employee benefits and you're at a firm and you do employee benefits and tax and maybe some other stuff. No, you talk about employee benefits. If you got a LLM in tax, you talk about how you took some employee benefits classes there. Maybe you talk about if you did worked in a firm over the summer, you talk about not that you did corporate and litigation, but you talk about that you did employee benefits work. You make it all about employee benefits. If you've written some papers, like one about, you might write a paper about COVID-19 laws or something like that. No, you leave it off. If you wrote a paper about COVID law, or not COVID law, employee benefits law, that's what you do. So you make everything about that practice here because this is who they want to hire. That's it. They don't care about all this other stuff. And I'm telling you this, by the way, as someone who's been doing this 12 hours a day for the past quarter century. So this is what it is. I'm not making this up. I'm not prejudiced. All I care about and all employers care about is you having a focused resume. Now, there's a couple exceptions to that. Sometimes in smaller markets might be like Milwaukee, or it's not even that small market, but maybe Grand Rapids, Michigan, or Findlay, Ohio. Like the firms may not have enough local business to have people to focus. So they may literally have you do corporate and real estate, and that's okay. But most of the jobs you're going to be applying for in most markets are going to they're going to require someone that is focused and has a focused resume. So if you're applying for a job that needs corporate and real estate, you talk about that, but you sure as hell don't talk about the fact that you did a personal injury case or something on your resume. You make it about what the person needs. That's all they care about, by the way. They're looking for focus on what you do. If you start doing really stupid stuff like putting keywords and writing long summaries and talking about all these jobs that are relevant to your practice area, no one's going to hire you. It's just how it works. Or you're going to get hired way beneath what you're doing. So I'm saying this and I'm being adamant about this, like applying to a lot of places, having focus on your resume, because this is all you need to do. And these are the two major things that will get you a job. And I'm sorry to drone on and on, but this is the biggest mistake that almost everyone makes. So you need to do that. The next one is your interview skills. So interview is something that is very difficult because people don't like criticism. Most people, I remember I was not the greatest interviewer. When I was in college, by the way, I had great grades and doing really well. But I would go I interviewed with probably 20 private equity firms, investment banks, anybody that's awesome you can imagine. And I didn't get singled out. I got a couple callbacks, but not a single job. What was I doing wrong? I'll tell you what I did wrong. It's pretty funny. So I'd written a book about the city of Detroit and how there was all this racism and how all these problems that were caused by big companies and how. So I would go into these interviews and people would ask me about it. And I'd drone on and on 10 minutes about how interesting the study was and everything. And people would just be like listening. And then after the interview, that I would say, good luck, and wouldn't get a job. That's about the dumbest thing I could do if I'm trying to get a job in an investment bank crunching numbers. That's the exact last thing that they don't want to hear. And I did that in every single interview. Very dumb. So a lot of times people will go into interviews and they'll talk about how they're interested in, I don't know, something that's completely irrelevant, some topic that's completely irrelevant to practicing law, and not the sort of thing that people in law firms do. So people in law firms are certain types of people, which you should understand, and they're not interested in a lot of fluff and things in your interview. So there are attorneys, by the way, and law students who literally go into every interview and ace them. Meaning, I've got people that go in and I talk to them. You got an interview here, no problem. They go in and get the job every time, no matter where. And then they say, maybe I don't like this firm because it's in this. And they're so self-confident, they know they can get every job. I have people like this. A lot of them, by the way, are from big cities like LA and New York. I don't know why that is, but I think they are just, maybe the environments make them more polished. I don't know what it is, but it doesn't matter. There are people that go in and bomb every interview too. Like you get them, they have great qualifications. You get them like 10 interviews and everything just bombs. I had one candidate years ago that I ended up placing the big firm, but the firm called me after the interview. If you send anybody like this again, we're not going to work with you anymore. There's people that get really bad. What do the best interviewers do? They do the same thing that you have to do on your resume. They focus on what the company, what the employer needs. The resume's focus, and then they talk about that. So if the firm you want to work for focuses on municipal law and land use there, you go in and you talk about how much you like that and how you want to do that. And then you make the people you're interviewing feel good about themselves and not you. What does that mean? It means that when you go and do an interview, you should ask questions that aren't stupid, like actually very good questions. And you should make the interviewer talk about themselves. They're going to like you more if they talk. So the rule is, by the way, that the interviewer should probably be doing upwards of 80% of the talking. And you need to steer it towards topics that they like and that they're enthusiastic about. So if you see someone who's written 20 articles about some obscure branch of securities, they're obviously very interested in it. And so you should understand what it is and then go in and get them to talk about it. People that go into interviews appear willing and able to work. They come across as people who very much want to work. They are enthusiastic about work. They are not asking a lot of questions, like being discriminated against. They see people as discriminated against, having a bad attitude. Employers see them as people who will support them, meaning that person's going to come in and they're going to stick around and they're going to have the employers back. And by the way, employers love attorneys that have a lot of that stay at employers for a long time. So if you were at a firm and you were there for 5 years and you're looking for a new firm, you're going to get a much better reception in the market if after 5 years that's your third firm, because that means you're loyal and you're going to stick around and the employer believes that. If you're not getting interviews and you're not getting offers after you interview, you're doing something wrong and you need to fix it. We have interview workshops as part of my webinars. So we do that. It's funny, attorneys are always afraid to talk about their career things in front of other attorneys, but that's okay. But you typically need to get interview coaching and read all you can and fix it. There are professional interview coaches. Most of them hire them before as recruiters. It's a game many times. They look while you're in and they tell you this and that. But you need to get interview coaching. You need to see what you're doing wrong, the things you're saying that are wrong in interviews. A lot of people are bad interviewers and that holds them back. But just to rehash all this, if you're not getting jobs after you're interviewing, then there's a lot of stuff that you need to fix. Typically, just so you understand, the biggest problem I think that people have in interviews is they talk too much about themselves. They steer the topics towards things that the employers are unlikely to be interested in. They just overtalk many times. They don't make eye contact. They don't seem enthusiastic about the position that they're interviewing for. They're not focused on the type of work that the person does. They say things that make it look like they're not going to get the interview. So you need to work on improving your interview skills if you're having problems, and you need to study articles that I've written. You need to study. There's not a lot of people writing about this stuff. Any webinars I've done, that you need to understand what you're doing wrong and mark up those articles, read them, print them, staple them, and don't let this hold you back. You should go into an interview and that should be your opportunity to take a job, to get a job. It's a great opportunity. And there's one final thing I want to say because it's just so important. And that's when you go into an interview, one of the biggest things to understand is that employer actually wants to hire you. They desperately want to hire you. The reason is because they don't want to have to use all this attorney time to keep interviewing people. Like, they don't like it. They just want to get this job done, get you in, make you a profit center, and be over with it. But when you go in, if you don't get the job, then they're going to have to take extra time. So they really want to hire you when you get an interview. It's yours to lose. And you need to be very careful and learn everything you can to get a position. So this next one is, should you take a job offer you're not happy with? So all the time, people get offers and they're not happy. Sometimes they go to law school and they think because they went to a top law school, they should be making a certain amount of money, get a certain type of job. And there's a lot of reasons to take jobs that you're not unhappy with. For example, you need the money, you have a family to support, or you're unemployed, or you're going to be unemployed, and this is all you got. Typically, by the way, if you're following my advice, meaning you have a good resume, you're applying to a lot of places, you're improving your interview skills, you're doing all these things, then you won't have a problem many times getting the best job you can. But you really do need to, if you get a job, think very seriously, because if you have a gap of unemployment on your resume, whether during law school, for example, you didn't work in the summers in a firm, that's not good. You want to work in a firm, or if you're unemployed as an attorney, like you lose your job. I see this all the time. I see every day. I see these great resumes of people that worked at great firms, and now they're suddenly unemployed. So if you have, and they've been unemployed for 2 or 3 months, the problem with any gap on your resume, and I don't want to be harsh because I know that there's people here probably that have these gaps on their resume, but the problem with a gap on your resume is that the conclusion that the employer is going to reach is that there's this gap on your resume because you were probably fired. That's what they think. It doesn't matter if it's true or not. If you weren't fired, then they say the person just couldn't get along, and this is going to probably happen here. So this is the problem with having a gap on the resume. Were it me and I was practicing law, I would always, if I thought things were weird, be out there networking or even applying to places and trying to make sure that I always have a backup plan, because this is serious. I mean, if you lose your job and you have a gap, you need to really do what you can to try to not have that gap. I'm sorry to say it. I'm not trying to hurt people's feelings, but it's very important. If I was at a big firm right now that's laying people off, I would be applying every single place I could if I thought I was next to protect my resume. So there's nothing wrong, for example, having a child. That is, people do that all the time. There's nothing wrong with certain things, but the idea is if you're having a child, you should be going back to the firm, or you should at least tell them they have an offer. And then the problem with the gap, and again, I'm not trying to upset people, but I'm telling you how important it is to get a position, is if you have unemployment gaps in your resume, this is going to show employers that you have a lack of commitment to practicing law. And I'm sorry, but that's how they think. It'll show that you didn't do whatever you could to find a position if you need a job, and you couldn't represent yourself. So what does that mean? That means when you're looking for a job, you're like an attorney out there helping their client. If you're not doing a good job in finding a job, then you probably are not as good of an attorney as you can be, because you're representing yourself. And if you can't represent yourself, meaning represent yourself and take this person and help them just like you would a client and get them a job, that's a problem. And how can you be expected to solve other people's problems if you can't even get a job when there's 30,000 law firms out there? Think about this. It's a problem. So you need to be, or you may not take yourself seriously enough to do a good job. I'll just tell you a brief story. I worked once with an attorney that literally had never lost a case. And I worked for him, and I worked almost exclusively with him for 6 or 7 months. And while he would he would turn over every single freaking stone he could in a case. And he would look at the legislative record of how the law came into place. He would do all these things that no one in their right mind would ever do. He'd interview people that passed the laws, and it just things that you wouldn't even believe. But he would always win. And this is the same thing with you. You have to win. The gap in your resume is not good. Firms will wonder why others are not hiring you. There must be something wrong with you. You must have done something wrong at your firm. People must not like you. You must have a problem that they don't know about. There's a lot of exceptions, but in most cases, attorneys with gaps on their resume had problems with their past employers. How do I know that's true? How do I know that attorneys that have these gaps on their resume are true? I'll tell you 2 quick stories. I think they're pretty interesting stories, but I've hired at BCG. I talked to all the people that applied. I'd always see these candidates that were like, they'd been at a big firm and now there's a gap on their resume. And I talked to them and they say they were fired, and you don't tell you why. And then I went ahead and hired a lot of them. Now this is a few decades ago, but I hired 5 or 6 of them, and all of them became huge liabilities. They were not following instructions. They were doing things the wrong way. A lot of them stole firm contacts out of my database instead of competing firms. Some of them decided to try to hurt my reputation and bad review. This is what happens. Like, employers are nervous about that. So I'm not saying that everybody that loses a job has those problems. These were people that lost jobs during good economies where they should have been employed, and they weren't getting jobs because of these gaps on their resume. So I ended up hiring them, and they became problems. And I'm not saying that happens with everyone, but I'm just saying that, and it happened with most of them. The longer you have a gap on your resume, the more it's going to hurt you. The other thing that's important is, and again, I'm telling you all this because I want you to just really do it really well when you're interviews. Employers want to believe that you need to work. That means they love it when you have mortgages. They love it when you're married and supporting a family. They love it when you have all these expenses and student loans you need to pay. This people that need to work are likely to stick around. The employer is going to have more control and all this stuff. So families, houses, all these things mean that you are going to be basically dependent on the employer to pay all that. You're going to do the best job you can. If you have 3 kids to support, the last thing in the world you want to do is be unemployed. You're going to try harder and do a better job. The idea also is that once you start working as an attorney, the expectation is that you will never stop. Like you will never, ever stop. And I'm sorry, but that's just how it works. And everyone knows that. I remember when I was clerking and my clerkship ended and I took a 3-month break to take the bar, study for the bar, and then to go travel and do all this stuff. And I remember someone saying to me, a couple of people, you can't have this gap in your resume. And one of the guys that said it was a guy that was clerking for a magistrate judge and had gone to like 4th-year law school. And he said, that's the first thing they told us in law school is that you just never want to have a gap. And so even there, they made us, you need to be very careful with all this. And the other thing to think about with getting offers is the kind of saying in real estate, the first offer you get is often the best offer. It's, in my experience, it's true. I bought a couple of properties where my offer was where I made an offer that was lower than someone had already got an offer for and taken. One time I purchased a home for $300,000 less than the offer that it got when it first went on the market. And then it sat on the market for a year. And the longer something's on the market, the more people were suspicious of it. So why has this house been sitting on the market for 6 months? What's wrong with it? And that's how people think. Maybe it's not worth what they're asking, so I should offer less. This house I bought was funny. It was right next to a bus stop, and when the buses would stop, they would blow all this black smoke in the backyard. And then it was also across the street from a large hotel. So during the weekends, people would clog the road, and there was no parking, and people would park illegally. And then you could hear people on the bus stop talking when they were waiting for the bus. And the whole house had bizarre paintings, and there was a picture of a naked person. It was pretty funny. It was a 25-year-old cocaine addicted woman that did it. And anyway, there was all these things that were bad about the house. But so as each person looked at the house, they initially thought all this stuff was cool. They got the idea that it wasn't good. What's wrong with this house? And that's how people thought about this house. And that's why I got a better price. The funny thing is, I'll just tell you what happened to it. I bought the house and then the new person moved in. They painted over after I stayed there for a year. And then 2 years later, the house sold for 3 times what it was paid for. So it did end up being a thing. But the idea that I'm making here is that the longer you're on the market, more people will question you. Your value is going to go down. People can offer you less money. And people are also going to be more nervous about pulling the trigger and hiring you. And they're going to question what's wrong with you for not being hired for such a long time. So how does that work? I'll just tell you some examples. I'm going to tell you one example because I really want you to understand how important it is to try to get a job and accept an offer before you look unemployed. So what happens is the longer you're unemployed, the more employers have the ability to take advantage of you. I had an incredible thing happen. I had a firm that had a real estate open. And this is when interest rates were very high, like they are now. This is in the early 2000s or even before then. And real estate was not an active practice area. So I had a guy that had been a real estate partner at a large law firm that was unemployed and had been unemployed for 6 or 7 months. And I sent him around to firms. This one firm called him and interviewed him. And he'd been used to making, I don't know, $350,000 a year at his firm. And this firm offered him a full-time job paying like $125,000 a year. And I was like, how's this even possible? Like, why would you make him such a low offer? It might have even been like 100. I was like, you're paying him less than your first year associates. And they said, we know that we can pay him that because we know this is the best job you can get. Imagine when the person was unemployed. So this is one of the reasons it's so important to find a position. Now, there's reasons not to take job offers you're unhappy with. When you take an offer you're unhappy with, you're often going to become toxic to the employer. So you need to understand that. I see people all the time that take jobs that they don't like. They may be on locations they don't like. They are not where they want to be. And you often have one foot out the door. So if you take a job you're unhappy with, you many times will resent that and you'll be angry, and you're angry that you're not getting paid. what you want, how much you should get, and you'll poison other people around you with a bad attitude. You'll have overall bad experience if you don't approach it in the right way. I used to all the time come across people in my job that applied to work with BCG, and they'd gone to Harvard, Berkeley, Columbia, and all this sort of stuff, and literally maybe didn't have a summer associate job, and then couldn't get positions after graduation, and then they apply to BCG to help me find them a job, like 6 months when nothing's happened. And in all cases, these firms, these candidates, and you may be one, had aspects that made them unattractive to the sorts of firms that employed their peers. It's not enough to be smart. It's not enough to have gone to a good law school. And so what I would also often do with these people is I would think, God, this is horrible that this graduate, this person of Columbia Law School that was a Harlan Fistone scholar is sitting at home, living with their parents with nothing to do. So I'd often bring these people in and start giving them legal work. I would give them things to do, and I wouldn't pay them that well. I'd pay them like maybe $40 an hour or something. But none of these people were happy. In almost all cases, they were resentful that I wasn't paying as much as law firms are paying. And in one example, I had someone working for me that had gone to Berkeley, but had graduated at some ridiculous age, like 19 or something. Had gone to college at really good school like Harvard or something, and graduated when they were literally like 16. They were just off the charts smart person. So this person was hired and couldn't get a job. They were recommended by a rabbi that I knew, and they couldn't get a position. So I brought them in. And then after being there for 6 months, there was a big salary increase of all the major firms. And he was going around telling my HR director how poorly compensated he was. And he was very unhappy and started making demands that he should be paid more. He started not focusing. He started leaving early and doing the job poorly. He would talk to other people around that he should be paid more. That he was great law school. He was not committed. He would just not do a good job. So this is what happened. So what happened with him initially? So I gave him raises. I started paying him whatever the big firms were for his last year, like $150,000 a year. And he just basically then was like, okay, this job's not as good as a big firm. So then he started not committing again. And what happened is that when a market slowdown hit and the company didn't have as much money, he was the first one to go. So that's how it works. If you really negotiate hard for a really high salary at some firms, you'll be the first one to go if you're not committing. But I've made this mistake hiring people on numerous occasions. The same thing always happens. Same thing with recruiters. I've hired a lot of recruiters that haven't been good hires. And then people will delay accepting offers and so forth. And then when they start, they won't commit to the job. People that are uncommitted, again, this is just something that you need to understand will complain, undermine the employers, and just be toxic. Again, if you want to be in another place, you just need to think about it. So I'm not going to go into a lot more details about this, but I believe that these are just some examples of people. I think I've given enough examples. So many times I've made bad hiring decisions, and that's also mistakes. Let me just move it. So let's see here. Yeah, I don't know how helpful this stuff is. They just don't want to do a good job. Yeah. Let me just see here. So this is about patients. Apologize. The idea that I would just say is that in order to get a position, you have to be many times very flexible. There's lots of jobs that you can find if you're willing to do them. But if you take a job that's beneath your skill set, meaning you don't have to work as a contract attorney, you don't have to work for a very low wage, you need to make sure that you're searching and using all the tools that I've given you and talked to you about so far. And if you take positions where you're unhappy and you're going to leave, that will make you negative. And you don't want to be negative. You want to be very positive. And there's another saying that I think is very important about never rehiring other people. And so if you leave an employer and then you want to go back, that's obviously not something that ever works out. And so you need to stop thinking about that. So let me just move through this. I don't want to waste too much time before the Q&A. These are reasons to not take jobs. You don't take a job when you feel like you're unwilling to commit. You don't take a job when you feel like you're going to be unhappy there and toxic. You don't pay a job if you feel like you're capable of getting a better job. You just shouldn't do that. You need to be very careful about where you go. You want to be positive and you want to basically appreciate the job that you get. And that's my best advice about that. It's the same thing with relationships. People do this all the time with relationships. They get involved with people that they know they're never going to commit to. And that's not fair to you or the other person. This happens all the time. And again, you should not marry someone you don't love or someone who's going to not give you what you want. You shouldn't stay in relationships with people that are never going to provide you with what you need. And it just doesn't help anyone. It's not going to help you. And another reason not to take a certain job is that it may communicate to future employers a direction of your career that's incompatible to where you want to go. One of the things I see a lot, and I'm not trying to upset anybody on this because it's important, but people often take jobs in practice areas where they may harm them in the future. They will take jobs at firms that are doing a certain type of work that will put them in a box in the future, or they'll take jobs with titles that they don't need to. Most attorneys do not need to work as contract attorneys. You can always find a job not being a contract attorney, being a permanent attorney. Most attorneys don't need to work in jobs in firms that are doing practice areas that they're not interested in. So if you don't want to do insurance defense and you want to do commercial litigation, you can find a firm that does that. But once you do insurance defense, you're going to be blocked in that way. And then you have to really be careful about the jobs you take. So if you want to be a plaintiff's attorney, it's not a good idea to take a defense job. If you want a permanent job in the future, you're going to be much better off not taking a contract job. So all these decisions are going to make a big difference in terms of your mobility. So you need to put yourself in a position working in the places where you really want to go. And what does that mean? That just means you need to have a vision, meaning you need to really know what you want in your career. And you can't just, and this is one of the most important things anyone can tell you. If you don't have a vision and know where you want to go, you're going to go where other people send you. And that's not good. If you don't have a vision to know exactly what you want, you're going to go with other people. You're going to go in a way that's not going to support you. Everyone that's successful knows where they want to go. So if you want to practice corporate M&A law at a big firm, and you have to start out at a small firm to do that, and you want to be a partner at a big firm, then you need to follow through on that vision. Because if you don't, you're going to be where other people put you. And you're not going to come across as someone that knows exactly what they want to do. So you need to have a vision, and that vision should shape the types of jobs that you take. Almost done with this. I think this is a very good webinar in terms of the topic and what we covered. But what I want to just make clear is most people spend their lives in careers dabbling. And dabbling is the absolute worst thing to do. Dabbling means not committing to a job, not committing to a practice area, not committing to a practice setting, not committing to a market, and not committing to a person, and not committing to an identity, and not committing to a career. So this is very important. What does it mean to not commit? It means that you have no idea what you want. And because you have no idea what you want, you're just trying everything out. You're doing all these different things. And dabbling is not knowing what you want to do, not having a direction for where you want to do is one of the most significant errors that people make. And it's often most pronounced when choosing your practice area, choosing your practice setting, and knowing where you're going to work. And when you get offers many times, you don't want or don't get offers at all, you're likely dabbling. Dabbling means you're sending out a few applications here and there. Dabbling means your resume is focused on different things and isn't focused. Dabbling means you're not doing everything you possibly can to get your dream, meaning the job you want, and extremely important. And this is the number one cause of failure for attorneys. They dabble and don't commit. This is actually what most attorneys do. Almost everyone. They dabble. They don't have a vision. They don't know what practice setting they want to be in. They don't have a conclusion about what they want to do. They don't have any of that. And therefore they're dabblers. What is the opposite of a dabbler? I just want to point this out. Every firm that I worked in, I was able to work with very successful attorneys, people that were definitely making seven figures, like multiples, like several, and this is years ago. And certainly I didn't work with all of them, but I worked with most of them. What did they do? They had all of them had these form files, like these cabinets full of articles and things that they thought were important, things that they'd read, and they were numbered and organized. Some of them had binders where they talked about where all the stuff was, because they knew that they wanted to be a litigator. They knew that they wanted to be an expert in something, and they knew, and this is what people do. This is what the best people do. They keep notes of things. They read everything. They go to conferences about it. They just focus. They focus, and they become successful. So if you don't focus, what's going to happen is you're going to be in a position where other people, you're taking these kind of jobs, other people are telling you what to do, you're clueless with your resume and you're going all over the place. You may go in-house, you don't know what you're going to do, and you're dabbling and not committed. And this is what you need to stop doing. You need to stop doing it with your resume. You need to stop doing it with your job search. You need to stop doing it with a number of places you apply. You need to stop doing it with trying to work in different practice settings if you can't commit. You need to stop doing it with practice areas. You need to stop doing it with moving around. Like you're a litigator and you're in fifth year, you decide to go in-house and take a government job for a few years. These are dabblers. And dabblers, by the way, nothing good ever happens to dabblers. They don't get jobs. They don't get, when they do get jobs, they don't get promoted. If you're a contract attorney, you kind of work in all these different places. You're not committing on what you want to do. And if you're not committed, people will just take advantage of you. That's how it works. If you show up in the city and you don't know what you want to do, you'll get a bad job. Think about it. People come over and they don't have any, you go someplace just as a human, not as a regular person, and you don't know what you want to do, you won't get a good job. Would you rather work as a waitress, or would you rather work as a highly skilled something that knows exactly how they want to do? Is it better to be an emergency room nurse than it is to be a waitress? You have to have some sort of focus, and people that have focuses do incredibly well. They do well in legal stuff. They do well in all other professions. It's absolutely incredible what a focus will do. And if you have a focus, people are going to, when you know what you want to do and you're not dabbling, you're going to rise to the top. Everybody does. Everybody that has a focus rises to the top. They absolutely rise to the top, because those are the kind of people that employers want. Those are the type of people that clients want. And most of the time, when you're not getting a job, you're actually dabbling. And that's the problem. The fault's with you. And you need to fix what you can and realize that being focused, knowing what you want, taking the action of what you want, and doing what you need to do is really what you need to do to succeed. This is it. Having a focus and knowing what you want. You want to work in a certain type of practice area, and you have experience in it, and you want to get a job, you're going to apply every place you can. You're focused. You know what you want to do. So this is really the biggest piece of advice that I can give you. But I think that once you do this, it changes everything. It changes the direction of your life. When you're focused, clients want you, employers want you, employers want to keep you, employers want to advance you, and you become something as opposed to nothing. So this is what most people do in their profession. They don't focus. They don't know what they want to do. They think like a worker and not an owner, meaning you think like someone that's just getting work and you have to gossip. It's not the right work, and you have to do this and that. And instead of being like a champion, a leader. And that's really the key to success. So I'm going to take a quick break just for a minute or two. And then when I come back, I'll answer questions. I'll answer as many questions as people have about this topic or anything else. And then we'll stay until all the questions are asked. And this, by the way, answering questions and so forth and getting these questions each week is one of my favorite parts of the week. The reason I like it so much is because it always gives me an insight into how people are doing and what they're thinking and all that sort of thing. Let me pull this up. Great, just give me 1 second. And I will start the questions. And I'm not going to do them in any particular order, so I'll start with whatever, and I'll just bounce around, but we'll get all the questions done. Let me make sure I'm good. Okay, good. First question. And oh, by the way, when you ask questions in this webinar, one of the things that is important to know is if you're logged into, I'll never show your name in this, so everything is confidential. Okay, are there any specific self-questioning techniques you recommend to help me clarify whether my current legal job is leading me towards my desired career path or sending me off course? So the idea is you have to figure out what you want, and how does that work? So you have to, this is just a question and answer that anyone can benefit from. But when you're trying to do something, and when you're trying to find out if you're interested in it, and if it's a good thing for you, you have to basically be like, does this interest me? Is this something where I could see myself doing this the rest of my career? Does this get me excited? And is it good for me? So I'll just tell you real quickly. And so it's all kind of a gut feeling. It's when you meet someone that's a good friend and you realize there's a connection, that's important. But I'll just tell you briefly, like my journey. So my journey was, I remember going out to eat. I was staying in a hotel and I was taking the bar. And I ended up taking the bar and right before I started my job. And so I was taking the bar and I was in a restaurant and I was reading like all these books. What can you do with a law degree? Because I already knew, and I was reading that book. And so I was literally going to my first job thinking about alternatives because I knew I wouldn't like it. And the more I did the best I could. But there were always these things I didn't like about it that just gave me like not a good feeling. It was just like I didn't really feel like I could commit to it. I knew it would be like if I went in house. It just didn't agree with me. And so when I found what I'm doing now, I was like, everything lit up. I'm like, this is everything I like. I like it's an underserved market. People aren't know what they're doing. Like there's when people reach a certain level of achievement and they're trying, just all these things appealed to me. And I knew I liked it. That's how it works. And I first met my fiance and it was just an instant connection. So sometimes things will connect with you very instinctively. So if there's things about your job and your practice area and your practice setting that aren't matching what you want to do, then you're probably doing something wrong. Sometimes it's just practicing law. It could be the wrong thing for you. It needs to match with you. I remember it doesn't really matter, but I guess one other point I would just say is when I was in law school and I had a class with this guy named Peter Swire that went to Yale Law School, and now he's an important guy advising governments and everything about. I think it's about data privacy or something, just a real important person. But he said I was in his office and I was talking to him about something and I just gotten the only A on a big important paper that was going to determine my grade in his class. And so I was there talking to him about something and I was in his class, I had the best grade. And he said, I don't know what you're doing here, but it's obvious you're not going to do this as a career. And I said, well, what are you talking about? He said, and then we were like in this room and it was overlooking the law library because it had a window, it was a hall and then the office overlooked the law library. And he said, look at what's going on down there. And everyone was like just really meticulous in studying. And he said, that's not you. And I was like, what? I got the best grade. I've been the best grade in your class. I was clerkship, I'm in law review, all this stuff. And he said, no, it's just not you. And he was actually right. And so the point is that if something clicks with you and feels right, then that's good. If it doesn't click with you and feel right, then it's not good. And so you don't need to take self-assessment tests. You just need to understand yourself. So there's also one thing I would say, there's on BCG, you can sign up, there's banners for it. It's called a DISC profile, which is like a personality test. And that will give you some indication of what your personality is, what type of person you are. And you can take that. But honestly, you have to be in the environment and with the people and in a profession that gets you excited. You have to. It could be anything. Like sometimes people leave the practice of law and they start a pizza restaurant, and the pizza restaurant becomes a national chain, or they leave the practice of law and they become best-selling authors. All these people do all this incredible stuff, but they do it because they follow their passion. They don't do things that they don't like. In the law, if you like it, then you just need to, whatever makes you feel the best, you need to do it. And that's kind of it, how that works. Okay, the next question. Okay, these are great questions, by the way. I really appreciate everyone asking these questions because I think it just benefits a lot of people in the future because I keep these questions and the answers. Sometimes these Q&As that people ask these questions, they become things that are viewed tens of thousands of times by others looking for answers. So it's just very helpful. Okay, regarding the length of the resume, what's the ideal balance between providing enough information, not overwhelming potential employers? Are there industries where longer resumes are more acceptable? So I'm just going to talk real briefly about a legal resume. So a legal resume really should never be more than one page. Now, there's exceptions to that. So if you're a patent attorney, you can include like a page or even multiple pages after your resume, talking about all these things you've done. Same thing with corporate transactional attorneys. You can do resumes like that, talking about all the transactions you've done. But in general, the resume just needs to be one page. You can't make it any longer than that. And you also have to not talk about things that don't deal with what you're doing. So you just don't want to look at things. One of the things I've seen lately, and I don't know why it is because of, I guess, the way the country is, but I've seen these resumes where
People are unemployed and they can't figure out why, because they went to NYU or they went to wherever, University of Chicago Law School, and they worked in a big firm. They have these resumes and they'll say, there might be like a corporate attorney, and they'll have 2 or 3 lines talking about all this pro bono work they did, and then 1 line saying worked on corporate M&A transactions.
So people are emphasizing the wrong things. Your resume, just all it needs to do is talk about your practice area, and that's it. So you just need to talk about your practice area, what you want to do, and focus on that and look like an expert. And that's really it. So you have to have that focus. And if you don't do that, it's going to harm you. And that's these resumes I'm talking to you about that emphasize the wrong things. All that happens when you don't talk about your practice here is people think that you want to do something else besides that. So that's how that works. So anytime you talk about things that aren't related to what you're doing, then that ends up hurting you. Oh, one thing I just wanted to show everyone, I think it's very important to always, even emails, things you write, everything needs to be in perfect English. That you need to proofread and make sure the grammar's good, because that's your brand. And as an attorney, you want to be communicating in the best way possible for clients and for employers, and the people will respect you for that. If you make a lot of errors, then they assume that you're not thinking through legal work and stuff. So it's always important. That's why I keep this open, not necessarily for this, but all my emails and correspondence, I make sure that I proofread. How can candidates ensure that resumes effectively convey their passion for the legal field and their commitment to making a meaningful contribution, even a transition from a non-legal career? Okay, that's interesting. What are your thoughts on incorporating? So if you have limited experience, that's a good point. So resumes of young attorneys or people that are in law school looking for things, you have to, obviously, to get the resume a decent length, you have to include things, but you don't want to include like too much. If you were like, sometimes people might have been sometimes people be in the medical field and they go into practicing the law. That's okay. You can talk about that, but you really need to make your resume look focused on wanting to work in a law firm. That's basically it. And there's ways to do that. But I will send out an invite to the resume workshop in the next week or two, and then when you get that, I'm happy to do your resume. But you just need to look like everyone. Like the biggest thing in a resume is, and this is actually very important, and if you're listening to this and you're sticking around, this will actually help you. And all this information that you're learning can change your life and career. But the biggest thing about a resume is it needs to show some sort of upward mobility. So that's how, this is what you do if you're effectively representing yourself. And it needs to, self-effectively. So what does that mean? So that means that everywhere you go, it looks like you're improving. It looks like you're improving and getting better in everything you do. And then the other thing is and then the final thing that you really need to do is you need to make sure, it's just ridiculous. Okay, so the idea, what does that mean? The idea is you take the reader away from things you're trying to prove, from whatever you're trying to improve. What does that mean? So that means you don't put things on the resume that detract from the fact that you're an attorney. You don't make yourself look like someone that isn't good at what they do, or that isn't. You make sure you downplay things that could give doubt about you. So what does that mean? That means that you limit the negative conclusions that people can read from your resume. So what does that mean? So I see resumes all the time where people might say, I graduated from this law school and I was in the top 50% of my class. No, you don't put that. Why would you want to tell the reader that you were in the top half? Maybe if you're in the top 5%, but you don't tell the reader you were in the top half. You just don't do it. It's not helping your case. So why would you say that? So people do this in their resumes all the time. Or they'll say something like, I don't know, but they'll say things that just don't make them look good. You don't put that on your resume. You want to look just very good at what you do. You want to look very focused. And that's really it. And if you don't do that, you're not going to do well. So you need to look focused on something. You need to look like an achiever. You need to look like someone that can, that you get negative information off your resume that detracts from the fact that you're doing something. Oh, question. There's a lot of questions. I'm trying to get through them. I imagine the focus of an outfit like yours is solely on law practice. What if you want to work in an area of law supporting roles. So specifically, I have a, this is interesting. I'm not going to do this, but specifically, I have an interest in lawyer wellness, well-being, and wish to work in a law firm environment where it necessarily requires self-initiated search or their staffing firms we can confer with. Great question. So I actually got a resume today of someone that applied to get a job with BCG. To get a law firm job, like practicing law. And the person actually had this position inside of a huge law firm, one of the biggest law firms in New York. Their job was helping lawyers. They were an attorney, went to law school and practiced a law firm, but their job was exactly this. It was lawyer well-being, making sure that people inside the firm were happy, then checking in on them, offering seminars about different things. This is actually a job now in law firms, especially the big ones. You can find it. How do you find it? Probably, I don't know. Maybe these jobs become open. Sometimes they do, but otherwise you have to network your way into them. Probably, I don't know, but there are definitely these jobs, and if that's something you want to do, you can do it. Now, staffing firms aren't going to be able to find you that position. I don't think. We may have some positions close to that, but they're probably more. But I don't think we do. We only recruit for people that are practicing law. But yes, this is a real job, and law firms actually have it now. So that's a really good question. But the thing about that position is if I were you and I was interested in something like that, what I would do is I would start maybe my own business or my own blog or something. Work with people. I think that would be very effective. I don't know exactly how that would work for you, but that's what I would do. It sounds like a good business for someone. A lot of people have done it. You just have to figure out, if you're not working in a firm, how would you make money doing that? And I don't know. But sometimes that sort of passion, like I have passion for what I'm doing, I certainly would recommend you start write about it. You can certainly write about it and work in a law firm. The more you write about it, the more you learn about it. You can do podcasts, articles, like all sorts of stuff that's probably going to get a lot of attention. Okay, what are the top 3 interview mistakes that candidates make consider and hinder a chance of getting offers, and how can you avoid them? The one is not focused, and looking committed. The other is talking about topics and interests in the interview. I'm just giving you 3 off the top of my head. In the interview that make it look like you're not committed. And then I would also say not allowing the interviewer talking to. I would just say not making sure the interviewer talks 80% of the time. So those are some of the things that I would recommend. But another one would be in terms of that. There's this thing that I go over, and I think that applies to everything. I'm going to, if you're a BCG candidate, I have this kind of report that I share only with law firms about the kind of people they should hire. And it's pretty simple, but it's, can you do the job? Is what the question they ask. Do you have the skills to do it? Most people they interview do. Can you be managed? That's another question. Do you want the job? Or do you want the job? Do we like you? And then these are the main questions. Can you do the job? Just means, do you have, and this is the other big one. Will you do the job long term? So these are important questions. Can you do the job just means, do you have the skills and do you look like you can do the job the way they want it done? So if they tell you you have to work in the middle of the night 3 days a week, are you going to say that's okay? If they need you in the office, if they don't want you to work remotely, that's okay. If you seem like you're someone that all these things that the employer is going to need, you need to look like you can do those. So if you have those, then the next question they're asking is whether or not you can be managed. So what does being managed mean? It means, do you seem like the type of person that's going to come in and do what they ask of you? Do you seem like the kind of person that sometimes people will say, I left the job because I didn't like this or that. And these things are management issues. Like these are things that people say they can't be managed. So you need to think about that. Can you be managed is a big question that employers are asking. So being managed means, do you seem like the kind of person that will follow instruction? Do you seem like the kind of person that's going to respect authority? And really, so you understand this, it's very important to understand partners have to be managed by firms. So partners are manageable. Associates have to be manageable. Everybody in the firm
has to be manageable. That means they don't like entrepreneurs that may want to do things. I'm the last person in the world a law firm should hire. They don't like people that will talk negatively about the firm. They need people that are soldiers, basically, and not generals. I mean, soldiers just do what you're told. You walk into a firing squad where you're going to die. Yeah, that's what you do. That's what soldiers do. They have to follow instructions. So they're going to ask that. Partners, by the way, have to follow instructions. Partners will go into firms and say, I demand this and I demand that, and they won't get hired. And partners will leave firms all the time because the firm, they're not manageable. So that's just a big important thing. Then the next one is, do you want the job? So people that want the job go in and they talk very enthusiastically about why they want the job. They're excited. They don't slump. They just seem like you're very interested in working there. And if you have that and you come across that way, then people like you. People like people that like them. People like people that want to work places. So you walk into a firm and you say, oh, I love your reputation. I love this about you. I can't wait to work on these kind of matters. That's different than the way most people come in. And then liking you just means you have to be able to connect with people. Sometimes you connect in weird ways, meaning you have to not, I say weird ways, like the reason I say that is I remember walking into a firm, a big New York firm once, and I was interviewing with this associate, and I walked in and I could tell immediately he was a tax attorney, that he was very weird. And there was just something about him that was just a little off. And he had this chair in his office, and I knew it was intentionally set that way, that was set like this. So I had to look over an interview and talk to him like this. But without saying anything, I went in and played his game and sat there looking over my head at him. And I could tell 3 or 4 minutes in the interview, the guy loved me. I was just really imitating his mannerisms and everything, and he liked me. And I found out later when I got hired by the firm, I was working there in the summer, that he was like one of the people on the hiring committee, and he was very important to hire. So people have to like you. And I'm just saying that was a weird thing you have to do, but sometimes you just need to find common interest and all sorts of things. There was a funny thing that happened. It was in one. And Morrison and Foerster in Denver had one of the only corporate openings. Maybe it was in 2000 during the internet explosion. And there weren't a lot of openings. There were just so few openings that a law firm anywhere would have an opening, and they would get hundreds of applications. It was like that with programmers and stuff too. I'd put an ad out and I get the applications would come in like one every 3 seconds because there's just everything was melting down. But what does do we like you mean? So what happened in that particular interview with Morrison and Foerster is this guy interviewed with a partner that was very important, and he noticed like a picture of the guy snowboarding, and he said, and he started talking about snowboarding, and then the partner realized that this was a guy that was almost like a professional snowboarder. It wasn't all in his resume, and he wasn't the most qualified for the job, but he's the one that got it because he liked him. So people making a connection is very important if you can. You don't have to make a false confession. You can come in and just be very professional, but they have to like you. And why do people not like you? Sometimes they won't like you because you may be on the wrong side of a political matter. Like they may be a Democrat, you may be a Republican, and you start talking in ways that show your affiliation, or who knows, but you have to be very careful with this stuff. So you need to make people like you. And again, the rule of the resume that I was talking about earlier is you don't want to take the person away from whatever you're trying to prove. So if you're a lawyer representing a criminal defendant, you don't mention that person has 3 other felony convictions, and you downplay everything. And it's the same thing with your resume. So do we like you means you talk in terms of that person's interest. You figure out what that means. And the final one is, will you do the job long term? That means, do you look like you're someone that's going to commit? Do you look like if they hire you, you're going to do everything you can to stay there? Do you look like you're someone that's committed to working in a law firm? Do you look like someone that's committed to that area? Do you look like someone that thinks this is a job that is going to make you happy and you're going to stay at? So law firms do not like hiring people that are going to leave. It's just not good for them. It's not good for their clients. It's not good for the morale of people there. So the best people to hire are the people usually that have stayed in their last job for a long period of time. So people come to me all the time, like, I'm at this firm. Should I leave? You think I should find another place now? I'm like, why would you do that? You're at a good firm.
You might be able to get a little more money, but that's actually going to harm you in the long run because you're going to look like you're moving around too much. So being able to do the job long term is a big deal. Now, I sell. My job is to get people to apply to firms and to represent them, and so basically I profit when people switch jobs. But my opinion is that anybody that's at a firm, if you're not moving up in some material way, there's no reason to move. People want to believe that you're going to commit. Now, how does a person look like they're not going to commit? The person that looks like they're not going to commit is someone that may have gone in-house after they take a job, or someone that may have done a lot of different things. They worked in a law firm, worked in the government, worked in this. Someone that looks like they're not going to stick around is always the worst type of hire. So these are the 5 things that I look at. You said ask for 3, but those are 5, and I think those are really important. And I've written a lot about that. I think that to the extent you can, I would read one of the things I've written. Okay, so there's nothing wrong with turning down a job offer. It happens all the time. I was actually thinking about this morning because one of the problems of my job, and I'm being very vulnerable here, I'm telling you, but when you're working with a law firm and getting someone a job there, you really have to be on top of it. You want the candidate to accept the job. And if the candidate doesn't accept the job, then the law firm thinks poorly of the recruiter. And they think the recruiter hasn't sold the person enough on the firm. And then the law firm actually sometimes will get mad at the recruiter, and even to the extent that the law firm will stop working with the recruiter and the people don't teach jobs. Now, does it happen a lot? No, very rarely, but it can happen. There's nothing wrong with refusing a job offer. One of the things that's important to remember, especially at large firms, like they interview so many people, like they don't know if you apply, and a lot of them have applicant tracking systems, so they'll know this information, but a lot of them don't. And so turning down a job offer, if you have good reasons for doing so, meaning I have to stay, my spouse is not moving now, they're moving in 6 months or something, they're moving in 2 years, like that's okay. But there's no legal ramifications of not turning down a job offer, especially if you do it in a good way. And sometimes the offer isn't what you want. It's not the sort of job that you think is going to be a good fit for you in the long run. And there's nothing wrong with turning about it, especially if it's not someplace you want to work. So I don't think there's anything wrong with turning down a job offer. Now, do I like it when the candidates do it? No. So I would be very careful about that. Let me see here. Okay, so this next question. So I'm here conflicting advice about whether to take a job offer I'm not happy with just to avoid an employment gap. Could you shed some light on the pros and cons of the decision, especially in the context of maintaining career-sense? Yeah, in this webinar, when you saw me glossing over things, I was worried that the webinar was getting a little too long, and that information I talked about, but I should have gone more in detail, probably shown those slides. But this advice about not taking a job offer you're not happy with, if you have a gap on your resume, it's just not a good thing in the legal profession. I don't know why. I think that law firms, it's a profession. Once you stop doing something for a period of time, that just shows that you weren't able to get a job. It shows maybe that you weren't committed. It shows that you're working that maybe you got fired, that you aren't able to represent yourself effectively, either through networking or whatever, and get a job. And that's actually an important thing to think about. So why is that important? Because lawyers are expected to be good lawyers representing themselves, meaning getting a job. That's the biggest test of your ability to get a position. Now, the other thing in terms of that as well is if you don't represent yourself, if you don't have a job, that means you may not want a job. It means you may be difficult to manage. It means all these things. It means, can you be managed? Maybe not if you don't want the job. Do you want the job? Do you want to work as an attorney? Probably not. Do we like you? Would you do the job long term? So I'll tell you something interesting that I've seen with really good attorneys. Like they are just, when they get older, like when they start getting in their, like in the, I don't know, 60s, 70s, and they want to keep working. What's very interesting about them is they tend to be very interested in their practice area, meaning they don't care if they're not going to make the most money, or they don't care. They're just interested in what they're doing, and they are committed to working as an attorney, and they know that whatever environment they get in, they're going to do well, or they're going to be practicing law because that's what they want to do. So if you get a job and you're still practicing law and you're still going to be learning things, well, that's very positive. There's nothing negative about that. You should take a job, even if you're not happy with it, because it keeps you going. And you can always come up with explanations later if it's not a great job that you take, but you don't want that gap. Now, if you're not happy with the job, it's just the same thing. It's like going into a marriage or a relationship with someone where you're not going to stick with them in the long term. That's a big problem. I don't recommend being in that situation. I think the best way to not be in that situation is to follow my advice and make sure you apply to a ton of places. So you have a lot of things, how marketable you are on the market. But if you're not happy with a position, then just go into it and do the best you can and excel and learn everything you can. Every place you work is a learning opportunity. So you go in there and you learn, you switch something later. But yeah, don't take a job that you're not happy with. That's the biggest thing. Now, what is not a good employment gap? So sometimes people will take a job that isn't necessarily a good job to have on their resume. So I don't think having, and I'm sorry to say this if you're in that position, I don't think having a contract attorney job is a good thing to have in your resume. I don't think going from a law firm to in-house is a good way to avoid an employment gap in your resume. I think if you want to work in a law firm, you need to go to another firm, hopefully practicing the same or similar practice area, and then do that as a full-time position, either as an associate or a partner or whatever. But you need to do that to keep yourself, to maintain your resume. This is what the best resumes do. People work in law firms. If you continually work in a law firm in something in your practice area, close to your practice area, and you stay with it, you will be able to get jobs in the future at other law firms. But if you don't, you won't. Okay, let me see the next one. And thanks for all the questions. Again, this is just great. People are. How can I have a desire to wait for more suitable job? Okay, so short-term positions, again, you can certainly do that. I don't know how long, if you're a law student, if you're a practicing attorney asking this, but the need for immediate employment, what does that mean? That means you're basically saying you want to get a job that's better, you think you can you get a short-term position? So here's the answer to that question. So if you're very focused on doing something like a certain practice area, a certain type of work, and you concentrate on that, and you focus on it, how things work, you will eventually get that position. It's just how it works. Your mind will work you into something like that. But if you're not getting a position, a certain type of job, you may just not be qualified for it. There may not be you may not have the background yet. You may not have applied to enough places, but you need to take the best you can get. So what's an example of that? So this is an interesting example, but it's not that interesting, but my wife, or my ex-wife, was a trademark attorney in Silicon Valley. And then the market crashed for technology and everything. And trademark attorneys are typically used to do trademark work for new businesses. And that just wasn't happening anymore. So she ended up getting laid off. When she got laid off, she started looking for trademark attorney jobs in Los Angeles. And there were none. So she got one interview, I think, at Greenberg, Gloucester or something. They had a job, but that was the only job there was. And there was nothing going on in Silicon Valley because the market was just crashed. Office buildings were, anyway, so it was bad. So the jobs she could get were offered were like insurance defense, like completely different than what she was doing. Like she was not getting the type of jobs that she wanted. And so she ended up leaving the practice of law and coming to work for me, and actually was exceptional at that job and very happy. But the point is that sometimes if you want to continue practicing law, you may not get the jobs you want, and you may need to look at multiple markets or search more for the position. But there's nothing wrong with not getting the job that you want. You have to take what you can get to stay in the profession. And that's actually better than having a gap or doing nothing. A lot of questions. Usually I'm a little bit more up in these presentations, but for some reason I'm a little tired today. So here, let's see. I've encountered situations where job offers seem ideal on paper, don't feel right in practice. How can I assess whether the job aligns with my values, personal satisfaction? So that's a good question. So there's a couple things that I think are important in any position that you're looking at. One of the questions that you should ask, not necessarily in the interviews, but you should figure out the answer to, is what happened to the person, or what happened to people that I'm replacing? Where do people go after working here? Those are good questions, because sometimes you'll see that everyone that goes to work there goes on to great things. Other times you'll see that they just crash and burn. Like, it's really bad. So I worked at a firm that's no longer in business called Dewey Ballantyne in Los Angeles. And I got there and I realized that, and it was a New York firm that no longer exists, but I got there and I realized the people that worked there were just having incredible career meltdowns after working there. Like, just awful things were happening. One woman who got at Columbia Law School is now a waitress. And there's nothing wrong being a waitress, but just so battle scarred by the place there. And so even though the firm paid incredible amounts of money for Los Angeles, I think that firm in Gavin had salaries that were like 50% of everybody else's. It just wasn't a good place. So a lot of times to get a feeling of the firm, the biggest thing that I think is when you're interviewing with a firm, like, do you feel connected to people? Do you feel like the people will look out for you? Do you feel like it's a place where you can have a really good future? Or does it just feel like, are you getting a bad vibe? And that vibe usually will tell you, even though the pay is high, will tell you really where it's going to go. And that would be my advice, is just to get a real good sense of what the vibe is and how that makes you feel, and go from there. This is a long question. What is the value of changing practice areas and even starting from the bottom if law firms won't take one? Okay. Secondly, as an immigrant, my foreign law students are not accepted for me to license practice in America. And frustrating is even paralegal jobs are not being offered. They keep saying no U.S. work experience, high country experience, 32 years in the bar. Okay, so the biggest thing is, anybody can get hired. You just have to find someone that will hire you. So if you're just sending resumes out, that becomes very difficult to get a position. So what does that mean if you can't get a position? That means that you apply to enough places where you're going to get a job. So someone will look at your background and will say that this person will work inexpensively for me, or I'm taking a chance on, take a chance on. So what does that mean? If you're a solo practitioner and you apply to work with them and you say, I'll work for $25 an hour, some ridiculous amount, then that person will hire you and give you experience, because that's the only kind of person they can afford. So anybody that's in a position where you're not getting jobs at the best firms. The best firms, if you want to be a paralegal, they can hire U.S. paralegals with U.S. skills all day. So why would they hire you? And it's not to be offensive, but what's their incentive? Everybody needs to start at the bottom if you're not getting something, and then you can work your way up from there. That's just how it works. I'm not saying that's what you have to do, but I am saying that the more places you apply to, the more people you meet, and then the further down you're willing to go in the pecking order, the better off you're going to be. So this is actually a good lesson for everybody on this call about when you're saying, what kind of firms can I get jobs at? So these are top 1% of all law firms in terms of prestige, top, maybe even 1/2 of 1% of law firms. These are things like Wachtell, Cravath, that sort of stuff that are pretty much impossible to get jobs at. And that's how it works. So you have the top 1/2 of 1%, and probably even top 1/10 of 1%. It's just, these are real kind of rare places to get a position in. And then you have your AmLaw 100 and 200 firms, which would be like 4. So what do those firms do? Those firms represent the biggest businesses, and that's what they do. Wachtell and Cravath represent that the company matters, the most sophisticated and the most important matters. And then these represent the biggest businesses, and these represent typically, these are middle market firms representing businesses, and mainly representing businesses, and represent what else we've been, and maybe a few individuals. And then, and then these firms are representing individuals in some companies, some small businesses, right? And then these are representing individuals a lot. So this is actually very important for everyone to understand. So these firms are pretty much impossible to get. You can't even lateral into them. So that's not a good option if you're looking for a job. These firms, the AmLaw 100, represent the biggest businesses. These firms charge a lot of money to and they pay a lot of money, and they're very difficult to get jobs at. And these would probably represent like top 5% of all law. Are you going to get maybe 5, maybe a little more? But it's just even there are 1,000 people in them. I would even say top 2%. These are just very hard to get jobs at, and you can, but they're very difficult. So everyone thinks they need to work in the top 2% of law firms, which is just crazy making. Why would you? It might even be less than top 2%. And then you have these middle market firms, which are mid-sized firms. They might have a 25-person firm in Arkansas. They represent businesses, mainly local businesses. They don't charge as much money. It's the AmLaw and Hunter law firms, so they're only like 2, and sometimes they represent companies. And so these firms are also difficult because they're representing companies, and the bigger the company, the better the work is supposed to be. That's just how it works. You can spend as much time as you want on something to get the best result, and that's how they work. But these are also difficult to get jobs with. So that's just how it works. So you have these ones. And then you have firms that represent individuals and small businesses. These firms do not charge a lot of money. So they might be immigration, insurance defense. And I'm sorry for giving this such a long explanation here for everyone on the call, but it's very important. And they tend to have lower hiring standards because their clients do not have a lot of money. And they can't pay a lot of money. So the clients don't have a lot of money. Maybe criminal, whatever. It's usually personal injury kind of stuff. So these firms do not pay a lot. They have lower hiring standards, and that's because individuals do not have a lot of money. And these people that are being represented most of the time won't even ask where you went to law school. It just doesn't even matter to them. And then this one is individuals without much money at all. And these people they could still do immigration or this trust in the states would be one for people without a lot of money. And this kind of stuff. So there's nothing wrong with this. They certainly aren't. They won't do corporate law or anything like that. So what does it mean when you're searching for a job? This could be immigration, traffic tickets, just stuff where the people don't have a lot of money to spend. So when you're looking for a position in a law firm, your ability to get the job will be based on the type of firm you're applying to. So this one is individuals with a lot of money. So if I was this person and you're having a hard time getting a job, you certainly don't want to apply to these firms. You certainly don't want to apply to these firms. You can start applying to these firms, but the best one to do is to apply to firms that don't have a lot of money. Solo practitioners just doing small matters that walk in the door. Small criminal matters. And this could be family law so this is the secret of anybody this can be family law too. But, this is the secret of anyone that's having a hard time getting a job. You just need to move down the line. And if you get to the individuals who don't have a lot of money, these firms will always hire you, especially if you are willing to work for nothing and very little money. I'm not saying you should, but the idea is you can start out at the bottom and everyone can move up. I've seen people start at firms like this. I had one guy I know that he didn't get an offer as a summer associate. He went to, I think, Michigan Law School, and he was very upset. And then he took the bar and he failed. He was very upset. And then he lost his first job that wasn't even a good firm because he failed the bar. And then he came back and got a job at another firm like this. And then he did really well there. He actually started building a book of business. Then he was able to get a job at a 3 firm, which is pretty awesome because he was so committed and so focused on his practice area. And then he moved to an AmLaw firm and he did really well there. And he started building, this guy is in New York, he started building like a big book of business. I don't know how he did it, but he was so hungry and eager to prove something. And then he ended up moving to one of these 5 firms after 15 years or 20 years. So it's all possible. But the idea is you have to start at the bottom in order to get to the top. And sometimes that's what happens. You don't have the right experience. You can give the right grades. Who cares? You just move up. So this person, anyone that's from a foreign country or bad in law school or you're not in good shape, you just take what you can get and then you start moving up and you learn. And that's the biggest piece of advice I can give anybody about that. I think it's very important to do that. There's a lot of questions today. See here. When does it become appropriate to no longer be flexible? I know exactly the practice I want in the city. I understand we need to be flexible. How dangerous is flexibility? If I take a job in a random geographic area in the practice area, vice versa, but I am not hopeful I'll be able to eventually end up where I want to be. I'm not graduating from law rank school. Okay, so this is a good example. It depends on the practice area you're in. If you're commercial litigation or something, I don't know, but if you're in any type of transactional practice area. So what is a transactional practice area? This is important for everyone to understand, very important. So transactional is corporate, real estate, patent prosecution. This all makes sense in a second. Patent prosecution, tax sometimes, trust and estates. Just things where you're dealing with kind of transactions, numbers and things, and not things that aren't like litigation related. Transactional. So what's nice about transactional practice areas is pretty much you can move anywhere. So I've seen corporate attorneys. I had one when I first started recruiting. I was like in my first year, and corporate was just going crazy. And so I had this corporate candidate in like a small 5-person firm in some suburb in New Jersey, not even Newark or anything. And he went out to a big firm. I don't know which one it was. I don't know. I don't want to say the firms and make them embarrassed, but it was a huge, like California-based law firm and like one of the most prestigious. And so this firm, because there was so much corporate demand, flew him out and flew his wife out with him and put him in this giant, like 2,000 square foot suite in San Francisco because he was so much in demand. So the point is that whatever your practice area is, I've seen people with real estate backgrounds. It's very easy in all these practice areas to move geographically. So you could take a job in a small market and move into a bigger market if you need this. And it's easiest with transactional practice areas. It's much harder in non-transactional practice areas, meaning litigation, things like that. But if in your transactional practice area, it's very easy to do. The camera was off. I just turned it back on, but I saw someone was calling me, so I apologize for that. But yeah, so transactional practice areas really are the easiest ones to move in. And if you take a job in a smaller market, you can pretty much always move in the transactional practice areas. I've seen patent prosecution people just move all over the country every few years. I've seen real estate people, corporate, trust in the states, all that. If you do a good job, if you're in a transactional practice area, it's much easier to move. And you can typically move regardless of how prestigious your firm is. You can always move up. And so just to give you an example, like trust in the states is done at 2 firms, but it's also done at 3 firms. It's also done at 4 firms because they have rich clients. And it's also even done sometimes at 5 firms. So there's certain practice areas. Sometimes these big firms do family law. So you can move up there. I mean, who knows? But literally they do. And so there's some practice areas where you can continually move to different firms depending on, you can move up and down and sideways and stuff to different markets. But transactional is usually the easiest. Okay, returned to work 5 years ago and have a great track record. Let me see here. With respect to interview success, let me see. Our past year, I've been a dozen interviews with only 1 offer. Okay, which I turned down because the salary offer was below the salary we discussed. I'm confident in my interview skills and beginning to question myself and the recent lack of success is potentially attributable to high salary requirements. Yeah, by the way, everyone that's on this call, and if you're still listening, that's very smart. Everyone's, by sticking around, this is a lot of important information you're getting. So the last thing in the world that you should be worried about when you're a young attorney is your salary. And I'll tell you why. Should be worried about as a young attorney. It's your salary. Why is that? You don't worry about it. It's not relevant. Why isn't it relevant? Because the law firm is training you. Like they're training you to do something. Like you show up there and you're getting trained for free. So you're getting trained for free, and not only getting trained for free, but you're also getting paid. So your first 5 years of practice are only about learning. Like you're not really a competent attorney until you've had about 5 years of training in a law firm. So if you can stick around for 5 years in a law firm, you will know what you're doing, and you'll be much better off. And so you have to really make sure that you're committed and basically not worrying about your salary. It doesn't matter. Like, it may matter to how you think about yourself to other people. It may matter how you want to be perceived with your peers. It may matter because other people are making more money. But honest to God, like, so you start your career. So just think about this. You start your career at, say, the age of 25. I'm just saying, this is hypothetically, but this is what a lot of people, if they go straight through law school, with 25. So how old is Biden or Trump? Or people practice and work into their 80s. I know lawyers that have been 90 years old and practicing. And I'm sure every year people like live longer and stuff. But just say, hypothetically, you practice until you're 85. I've placed people in their 80s with huge books of business. That's, see, 25 to 85 is 60 years. So why would you want to start your career and worry about how you're getting paid in your first job when you have 60 years in front of you? And the most important thing you can do now is learn your practice area. So I just want to be clear with everyone that's a young attorney, is there's no reason to worry about your practice area. All you should care about is getting training, and think that the training is free. Because what can happen with that training? If you're trained for 5 years by a law firm, you are suddenly in a position where you can often set up your own firm and compete with them. You're in a position where you can move to a better firm. You're in a position where you have the ability to work in a similar firm. You have the ability to work in other markets. So no, you should not, there's no such thing as a salary requirement. If you're doing that, you are out of your mind. And I'm not telling you you're crazy, but I'm just telling you that's the last thing in the world you should be concerned about. You should be concerned about getting training. And if you're sticking around and worrying about your salary and having all these requirements, that's not a good thing. So what do you say? What do you say when someone offers you, what do you say? What do you say when they ask you about what your requirements are? So this is what you say, and I'll tell you how it can backfire sometimes. It's actually, I have a sad story about it, but I'll tell you that in a second. What you say is, this is the answer you always give. The answer you always give is, I would like to make the same amount as my peers in this position. That's it. That's all you have to say. In this position. That's it. Position with your firm. That's it. That's all you have to say. You don't have to say, I need to make this much, I need to make that, because if you say that, think about an employer. So I remember once I was interviewing with this firm in Century City in Los Angeles, beautiful offices, but it was a smaller firm. And at the time I was making $180,000 a year as a third-year attorney. And this is, again, keep in mind, this is in the 1990s. Okay, so this is a long time ago. And so that was like incredibly high salary for, it was probably the highest, that and scatter were the highest salary you could make in Los Angeles by last year. So I'm interviewing with a small firm, and they asked me, what are your salary requirements? And I say, this is what I'm making. I'm happy to make 150. And the guy says, that's what our partners make. This is, again, that amount of money then would probably be 350,000 for a small firm, which is bad. But the point is that you don't talk about your salary requirements. That's the exact way not to get a job. You would have to be crazy to do that. I'm just not saying you are crazy, but anything you say to not get a job is going to hurt you. So you just say, I want to make the same in this as my peers in this position with the firm. I'll tell you a very sad story. It's actually sad, but I had this candidate who's no longer alive, and I really liked him. He was and I don't know, I connected with him. He just was a really good person, just a really solid guy. And he was English, and he wanted to work at a big firm in London that had dual citizenship. So it was like his mom was English or something, so he was able to get an English passport and be an English citizen. But he grew up in the United States, and he was working at this big New York law firm and wanted to go to work in London. And so I got him this job at a huge, the best law firm probably in London, and where he was in a practice area and had a very good opportunity to make partner. And the way it works in London at this firm is they do what's called lockstep compensations. They start you out of something, and then you make partner, you make less, and the more you work there, the higher your salary goes, but it doesn't even have anything to do with business. It's old school. Anyway, so he got this job, and they were ready to make the offer, and he said, how much
money would you like to make? And he said, or what is your salary requirements? He said, I want to, so I told him, I want to make the same amount as my peers in this position with your firm. The English salaries for attorneys are much lower in the United States. And so when they made him an offer, which was funny because these English firms were like this contingent on a successful physical exam and all this stuff you would never see in the US. They made him an offer the English salary, which is maybe 70% or 60% of what he was making in the New York firm, and he turned it down. And it was a good firm where he would have not had to work as hard and all these things. And so he stayed at this New York firm, and then he worked like crazy. Like I kept checking in with him. He's like a billion 2,800 hours. I never stopped. And then like 10 or 12 years ago, I tried to call him. And by that time, he was still young. He was in probably his late 30s and had a heart attack and died. Sad. And I'm sure it was related with the work. And he was such a nice guy. I really liked him. But the point is that sometimes he wanted to make a high salary for this English firm because he thought that he should deserve what he's making in New York, and that firm did pay like English securities attorneys. He wasn't a securities attorney, he was IP. They did pay them a high US salary, but they didn't stick around. So he had this opportunity to go someplace where he had a firm with a family, he was home in his country, and he didn't take it and wanted to make these high salaries. So he would have been happier had stayed there. So never say that you want to make a certain amount of money. I had another case not too long ago where I was working with a partner that was at a major US law firm, and she was getting paid $3.5 million a year and didn't have a book of business. And she was being pushed out of the firm. So when I say pushed out, the firm was basically telling her to move along, and your job, we just are not going to keep you around. That's the kind of message she was getting. So she was looking for a job, and I found her a job at a really good firm, but it wasn't, most firms do not pay partners without business $3.5 million a year. So I found her a job, and really the most I could get her, I'm not saying it's just the way the market works, is I got her a job paying like a little over $1 million a year. And and when I told the firm how much she made, they were just like, whoa. And it was a really good firm, and they were just like, there's just no way. And she told them that was her requirement, is to make something similar because she was relying on this. And so she didn't get a job. And then now she ended up, I think, unemployed. So you basically, the message you say is I want to make the same as my peers in this position. I want to be compensated fairly according to where my peers are. And that's it. You don't say my requirements are this, my requirements are this. And then, or if the firm comes back and they say, we don't have anybody in this position, how much would you like to make? And you say, whatever you think is fair for this position, this is what I'm currently making, but I realize I don't have to make this much in your firm. So sometimes they'll say that. But the point is, if you make your job with the firm contingent on making a certain amount of money, then that's just not good. You're not gonna get all the offers you can, because you need to be concentrating on getting trained, and that's the most important. Okay, so this is a good one. So this question is, what if a HR person screens you out because they don't understand the technical requirements of the position, don't realize you are actually a very good candidate? Do you send a friendly link to them? Yeah, so that's a good question. So sometimes HR will screen you out. 99% of the time, they're right, but sometimes they're not. You have to understand that the HR job inside of a law firm can be very difficult because they have to find certain people. But sometimes they're not screening you out for the technical requirements. They just may screen you out because they know you have the background that wouldn't work. You may see a job listing and think you're really good, but here's an example. So certain firms will hire you if this is your first lateral move, but other firms, if they see you've had a job for one place for 1 year and you've had another one place for 1 year, and then you're on your third job, even though you're technically competent for the position, they're just like, no, sorry, we look like a job hopper or whatever. So they may see something, or maybe you're coming from in-house and wanting to work in a law firm. So they're not just screening you out because of technical requirements. It's because you're not a good fit. I had something interesting happen, and I think a lot of these questions, and it's very good, are about salary, getting paid the same, getting paid an amount they want. They're also about technical requirements. So I had this interesting thing happen. I saw this resume of this woman, and she'd gone to a top law school and a top college and majored in electrical engineering. And I was talking to her, and when I talk to candidates, I try to find who they are, and because I really want to communicate that to the law firm. I want to tell the law firm
this person is this personality, and this is what they do, and this is what's interesting about them. And so you have to do that as a good recruiter to get information. So I did that, and I was asking her these questions, and she was just talking to a brick wall. And she said, none of this matters. The only thing that matters is my technical requirements and the fact that I can do the job. And she was just and I was like, well, I can't help you if you're not going to be connect with me. How am I supposed to represent you at the law firm? And she got real mad, and then I don't know, the conversation kind of ended. I tried to end the friend group. And then after I was done, I looked her up, and she'd been in all these lawsuits. Like, she'd sued a big law firm that she left, and she'd sued like a beauty parlor for giving her a bad haircut. And so there's just all this stuff. And so that was an example of someone that was like, it's not about anything else. It's only about my technical requirements. You're not going to not get it. You're going to, when you don't get an offer, it's many times about other things other than about your background specifically. Okay, I'm trying to see if I have any more questions, and it looks like we're pretty much done. If no one has any more, I appreciate everyone staying on this call as long as you have. There was a lot of good information today, questions, and then next week I don't think I'll have as much time, but it'll be a quicker webinar. And in a couple of weeks, if you just watch your email, we'll do a resume review, and I think that's always really important to do the resume review because that'll give you a lot of information. Those typically are longer calls, and that can be real helpful. So I appreciate everybody being on this call today. And then just if you're a BCG person we're working with, just remember we do onboarding calls, which mean we talk about how we work with you in the search. We do that Mondays, and then Tuesdays we always do a resume review, so you can send your resume to me before that meeting. We do that, and then Wednesdays, of course, are this, and then Thursdays we do interview prep where we talk about interview questions, and then on Fridays we have an open meeting again, and then so those are all important to attend. But I certainly appreciate everybody being on this call today. There's a lot of great questions, and this particular PowerPoint for this will also be put up on the site in the next few days, so you can go through a lot of this. But the biggest thing I would say to anybody that is looking for a job and not having luck is just remember that there's kind of all these options of places you can work with, and you definitely need to look at more markets. That's a huge mistake that people make. Thanks again for being on this webinar, and see here real quickly. Anything else? Yeah, and I think that's about it. And I will talk to everyone next week. So thank you.